Hey everybody, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com. Hope you're having an excellent day. Gonna wrap up this little mini-series here on the number one rule of home recording. What is the number one rule of home recording? It is simply limit your options like your life depended on it. This is literally how I try to frame every decision I make in the studio. It sounds kind of wacky, but it really helps me. So real quick before I jump into this last video, if you haven't read the ebook, it's free. It's right there. Go download it at therecordingrevolution.com. You can't miss it. It's right on the homepage. I wrote this about 3 years ago, and it's pretty much the core of what I believe and write about and do videos on. So it's free. Go read it. It's fast. You'll love it. You'll read it in like 30 minutes. Then I did the first two videos in case you missed them, in case you're just jumping on the channel today. Go watch those first, okay? They're both right there. The first one kind of gives you an overview of how this rule applies in general, like the kind of the concept behind it. And so that will help you understand where I'm going with it. And then the second video we did last week is on how do you apply this number one rule to your gear, the stuff you buy in the studio, your hardware, your software, plugins, microphone choice, what audio interface do I buy? All those questions that I know you're asking, that video will help you. So go watch those real quick, then come back here. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about how does the number one rule of home recording, limiting your options and saying no to choice, how does that apply to your music production technique? How does it apply to recording technique? How does it apply to what you do when you're editing in your DAW or mixing? A lot of these things we need to discuss because there's so many options, there's so many techniques, and a lot of different people have different workflows, okay? But I think that this rule will help you streamline whatever workflow you choose, whatever genre you're in, whatever way you like to operate, whether you work in a home studio or not. I think applying this rule to you actually getting in the studio and working, once you have the gear, speed things up, you'll get better results. Okay, so what I'm gonna simply do is just tell you what I do in the studio because that's all I know. Okay, I've seen how a lot of other people work. I've studied under some great people. I just am not that smart and I don't have a lot of time. I have a wonderful wife. I have 2 little girls that I'm trying to raise. I have other things that I do to make a living while I try to make videos for you guys, working in my church, trying to help people and serve throughout the week. I'm meeting with friends. I'm having people over for dinner. I'm a regular person like you. So I don't have a whole lot of time. So when I'm recording bands or if I'm mixing for clients, I have to work fast and I have to work well. And so this is exactly what I do to get the results using the number one rule and sort of trying to streamline every possible thing I could possibly do in the studio because I just don't have mountains of time. Okay, so number one, when it comes to actually recording, let's talk about mic placement. I only have a handful of mics that I really like that I think are very versatile and very low cost and effective, right? So I try to gauge what mics are gonna be best, and I pretty much have that figured out, but when it goes to actually recording, I know that mic placement is the best thing you could possibly do to get a great sounding recording or mix, right? It's EQing on the way in, it's making decisions on the way in, so I know that I wanna spend enough time on mic placement to get it right, but I don't have a ton of time, so how does the number one rule apply? I only pick 2 positions. Take the example that I gave maybe 2 videos back about limiting your options and the guy that only has 1 microphone and he wants to record acoustic guitar. Having just 1 microphone is great because it speeds up the choice process. Grab your only mic and go. When it comes to placement, he could put the mic anywhere on the body of the acoustic or on the neck or over the shoulder or behind or far away or close. I mean, there's a million ways you could mic it up and there's no right or wrong way. So to save time and to use the rule, this is what I do. I put the mic where I think it should go. I record a bit, I listen back. If it sounds or even if it sounds good, I never stop there. I always move the mic in one other place. I try to think about what could be improved on it, even if I somehow found a great starting point. If I could improve the sound a little bit, how could I improve it? Is it too bright? Is it too mellow? And I try to make an adjustment, record the second placement, listen back, then I compare the 2. They're probably gonna sound slightly different and I just pick the one that sounds the best and I go. I know that sounds simplistic. I know that sounds like I might still be missing out on an even better placement, but I'm probably 80 to 85% of the way there to a great sounding mic placement, and I've at least made a concerted effort to pick another placement and then compare it. When you compare, you learn 2 things. You learn either, man, this second placement does sound better. I'm so glad I didn't settle for my first mic placement, which is a wonderful feeling. Or it only confirms that your first mic placement was better. You know, I really did like that sound better for XYZ reasons. Then you feel real confident about that mic placement, which was your original placement, press record, and you go. I can't handle more than 2 options in the studio when it comes to mic placement, so I just try 2 and pick the best. Okay, as it relates to recording, once you've got the sound the way you want it to sound, right? You need to know how many takes to record, and this is a problem I see all over the place in the home studio is we now have a DAW, which is basically recording to your hard drive, which is getting bigger by the day, which basically means we're not gonna run out of tape. That used to be the problem, you'd run out of tape. So you had to record as many takes as you could within your limit, which was your tape or the number of tracks on your console or your multi-track tape. We don't really have those problems. We have as much hard drive space as we want. And with most DAWs, we basically have infinite tracks to layer, okay? So you could do multiple takes, virtual takes, or like in Pro Tools, they're called playlists, or you could have multiple tracks. I'll record one pass of the vocal this way, one pass of the vocal this way, and I will get tracks from clients that have 7 lead vocal takes. Like here's a lead vocal, but I look underneath it, it's really 7 takes that we've got. And I'm supposed to pick the best take, or I'm supposed to comp together the best parts of all 7 takes so I have this one mega take. That's depressing. I don't have the time to do that, and even if I had the time, ironically, all that comping and all that editing and all that choosing, I'm not gonna get a better sounding vocal than if I had just recorded 2 takes. This is what I do. If I have a choice, if I'm recording the artist or recording myself, I make sure that I'm prepared, I make sure that the vocalist is prepared, I make sure that my monitor mix is set, I make sure that everything is set the way I want so that I know the sound is gonna sound good sonically, engineering-wise. I know that the artist or myself is in a good mental spot to be able to perform well. All that is worth spending a little bit of time on, but when it comes to actually hitting the record button, I tell the artist, you got 2 takes of this, man. We'll do a warm-up take. I'm gonna get some levels, get you comfortable, so I don't really count that as a take. That's just great advice to get them to sing it and know that, okay, I could do a whole song with my headphone mix, everything is good. You wanna keep that take just in case there's some magic. But when it comes to actually recording, I tell the artist, you got 2 takes, man. You know this song. I can comp things if I need to. I can tune things if I really need to. So don't stress, but just sing the song all the way through. And then when we're done, we'll do it one more time. So we've got 2 great takes and we'll pick the best one later. Why do I do this? Because again, the rule simplifies my life and it actually gets me a better result. So when I go back to editing, I can just pick the strongest take and usually can tell that right away. And then I can comp together maybe some wonderful golden nugget moments from the second take, the not as strong take. There might have been a couple of vocal runs that he did, or he held out that note a lot better on the second take. Sure, comp that into the first take. That's the beauty of editing. But really, that way when you're trying to make decisions about what's the best moment of this one verse, or he says that one word, you're not trying to listen to 7 and then try to remember what did take 3 sound like. Was that actually better than take 7? Or to take 1 sound better? That's maddening. So you have 2 takes, it's very easy to comp, and then you know that you've got the best of what you have, and it speeds things up. Drums, I only let a drummer take 2 takes all the way through the whole song. Once the drums sound good, and the drummer is sounding good, and his mix is sounding good, just track the drums like you would playing the song live, and then track it again and walk away. Guys like guitar players, or all the other instruments, I really don't even want them to have multiple takes. I'd rather punch in and get it right. So we'll play, we'll stop, we'll punch in, and we'll make sure we just get 1 take that pretty much is there. It's just vocalists, drummers, and maybe bass players that I let do 2 takes, and that's it. None of this crazy 7 take stuff. It'll save you time, and you'll actually get a better result. Okay, editing. Editing is an area that I used to struggle with and I would abuse, right? Because I love perfection, okay? And I see that you have all these tools available to you in the DAW to actually make a track perfect. So I'll be honest, I would just quantize everything perfectly and I would chop up everything I could possibly chop up and line it to the grid. I love the grid. And I would clear out every noise, every breath, everything. What was the result? The result was something that wasn't very musical. The result was hours wasted. The result was my mix still didn't sound good because I wasn't good at mixing. Then you could kind of go back and think, maybe I don't need to edit at all. Maybe I'm the kind of guy that says editing is cheating. And if you're really a good engineer, you don't need to edit. If you haven't really paid attention, editing has always been around in the realm of recording. We just actually had to cut up tape and tape to each other. which is depressing. So you live in a glorious age now where you can just cut, slice, copy, paste, move. It takes seconds, it doesn't take any skill, and it'll sound amazing because you can do a crossfade like that. Take advantage of editing because the guys 30, 40 years ago would have been doing it as well. But what you need to do is think like they thought. They were limited in how much they could cut up. They were limited because editing tape was a pain. So they thought long and hard about what edit moves are really worth it. What's really going to make a difference in the song? If it means splicing together the chorus drums of this take to the chorus of this take, so overall it's a better chorus performance, that could make or break a song because he really just was hitting everything differently and the vibe was better. Sure, edit that chunk in. Like we talked about with comping vocals, comp some vocals. If you hear some pops and clicks that are just distracting, quickly find them and edit them out. You don't want anything distracting to the listener. But don't go looking for something to edit, because you'll find it. You will find some stuff to edit and you'll see stuff in your DAW which you probably can't even hear, but you'll see it and go, that shouldn't be there, so you cut it up. And now we're getting back to what do you see versus what is the listener ever gonna hear? Are they ever gonna hear that stuff outside of the room? Are they ever gonna hear that shuffling of your clothes while you're singing your vocal take in between? Probably not, because there's other guitars playing. Don't go listening and finding something to edit, but if you notice things that distract from the element and the focus of the song, that's why you have a DAW. Go ahead and edit and then move on. Okay, mixing. Mixing is where I spend a lot of my time teaching because mixing is so important. Mixing is so complex at times, and mixing seems to never end. I mean, think about it. If there were a definitive way you knew you were done with a mix, that would make all of our lives easier. The problem is how do we know when we're done? There's always something we could tweak. There's always a plug-in knob we could turn. There's always a new EQ setting or a new effect we could add. And then we never know if our bottom end and our top end, if the punch, if everything is perfect, especially if we reference it to other pro tracks. We go, okay, well, it doesn't sound quite like that track. What can I do? We could just run in circles, never ending with a mix. When mixing, I have to lay down some limitations, otherwise I will spin forever. So here are 3 ways I limit myself in mixing. I limit myself in time, I limit myself in track, and I limit myself in plugins. Okay, so time. I set a boundary that's gonna be how long I'm devoting to a mix, okay? And this has changed over the years, and it'll be different from person to person. It depends on probably the material you're working on and maybe your skill level. But whatever it is, no matter where you are, if you're a beginner or even if you're advanced, you should have a clock ticking, all right? So literally I'll take my phone and I'll set the alarm for a certain number of hours or a certain hour or whatever it is for that mixing block, and I'll let it tick and it will beep when it is time to be done. Whether I actually stop when it's done or if I keep going for 15 minutes or whatever, that's not really the point. The point is I know that thing is ticking down. And I kind of feel that pressure. And if I glance at it, I'm, oh, dude, I waste 30 minutes just listening to that kick drum. I gotta move on because that's not big picture stuff. And so it helps me think big picture. So I limit my time, and you should do this too. Set a time limit, set an alarm, even a kitchen timer, whatever it is, so that you feel that pressure. I gotta keep moving. I gotta keep moving. Otherwise, you will stay there in kick drum solo land forever. 2, I limit my track count, okay? I've mentioned this on the 5 Minutes to a Better Mix series. I really believe that 24 tracks is a great benchmark for most people to mix under, okay? It is insane to me to think about how many people are mixing 100 plus tracks, okay? Now I read Sound on Sound magazine, I read all the other magazines, and I love reading about some of my favorite mixers and guys that maybe I haven't even heard of, but I know the work that they've mixed, and they'll show you like the Pro Tools session for that #1 hit single for that one artist, and they'll tell you about how they mix it, and you see they do this composite image because it won't fit in one screen grab of the 100 and 150 tracks that they mixed. That's insanity to me. These guys must be freaking geniuses to be able to wrap their mind around 100 tracks to get them all to play nice and dump it all to a stereo track that we listen to on our iPod and go, yay, I love this song. That's really hard to do for me, okay? Now you might be smarter than me, and it's probably true. So if you can handle 100 tracks, please do it. I am just telling you from my limited experience over the last 10, 15 years of trying to mix music, I cannot handle successfully more than 24 tracks. Now I can fudge it, but it doesn't really help me. There's like a diminishing returns, that point of diminishing benefit and returns that once I get past 24, I'm not really seeing any improvement. Maybe it feels cooler because I have lots of tracks, but I'm not seeing improvement. So I will literally narrow tracks down, try to bust tracks together and hide tracks, try to comp things down, try to eliminate room mics that I'm not going to use, eliminate that guitar part because it really is sort of like a redundant track to that part, or there's lots of layered guitars and they're all kind of fighting for space. Instead of trying to EQ them all to work, I just mute or delete some of them, and all of a sudden the other ones work beautifully. So I will limit with that 24 track-ish sort of track count as a benchmark for me. If I can get the mix under 24 tracks, then I can go. That's because I'm getting tracks that have way too many tracks in them. If you're recording and mixing your own music, you have some choice and some control at the beginning to simply record fewer tracks. That means you have to have a better idea of your arrangement. It's lazy to record 100 tracks. Now, that's a blanket statement. In some of your genres and some of your music, you might find a reason to have lots of tracks, especially if you're recording a massive orchestra. Okay, but then even then, I would bounce that down to a few stereo tracks. But it is just lazy to record and record and record and record more and more tracks and be like, all right, cool, now I got a lot to work with. That's just pointless because you got to work with it at some point. That means you don't have a good arrangement or it's not solidified enough. So if you're recording your own music, think all the way to the end about how many tracks do I want to deal with and what do I need to really convey this song, and then make some decisions early on and learn to commit to some sound. So when you open up the track in a week or so to mix it, you're just looking at 20, 30 tracks, and it is much easier and more manageable to go, okay, here's my drum sound, here's my vocal sound, here are these effects, here are these background vocals, here are these strings. You can do a lot in 24 tracks. If you think that sounds limiting, you haven't really thought hard enough. You can have a massive, massive sounding track with 24 tracks in the mix. Okay, and then the third thing I try to limit myself on with mixing is plugins, okay? We talked about this in the last video about don't buy a bunch of plugins that you don't need. Whether you buy a bunch of plugins or not, or whether you already own a bunch and you're thinking it's too late for me, Graham, I've already spent a lot of money on plugins, don't worry, I have made that mistake myself. Or you just have the simple stock plugins that are coming in your DAW. Those are still a ton of plugins to choose from. The goal of mixing isn't to use a lot of plugins. The goal of mixing is to actually use as few plugins as possible. Think of it that way, right? Think about it like a game, and this is what I do. How can I get this mix to sound amazing with like using as few plugins as possible? If I could just use one plugin on my mix bus and then adjust the faders and the pan knobs and it sounds amazing, that would be ridiculously awesome. That would mean that the tracks sounded that good in the recording phase and that all they needed was some overall vision, the proper balance, and some artistic placement in the stereo field, and maybe one final thing to run them all through, and they would sound amazing. That should be your goal. In reality, you're probably gonna need a few more than one plugin, but that's the way you wanna think. If I could just use an EQ to get this track to sound great, how can I do that? Instead of jumping for all these weird distortion plugins or effects or phasers or things. Now, making effects effective for the sake of having a cool effect is, I understand that. It's part of mixing. It's part of the sweetening phase. I've talked about that on the blog. Check out some videos on sweetening right over there. But the idea is the more plugins you introduce, the more you go searching for plugins, the bigger the can of worms you open up, the bigger the rabbit hole is, the more time you're going to spend on your mix. And again, I don't think that equates to a better sounding mix 99% of the time. Maybe that 1% of the time, all your fiddling with plugins led you to stumble across some incredible preset on a plugin that really did make or break the song. It's happened before, I believe it's possible, but that's not the case most of the time, right? So save yourself some trouble. This is what I do, limit the number of plugins I plan to use. And when I see my plugin list filling up or I see my tracks and all the inserts getting filled up, I start to stop and bypass some plugins and make sure that I'm really helping the mix or am I getting lost. There it is, the number one rule of music production, how to take the limiting your options mantra that I push and push and push and apply it to recording, to editing, to mixing. It's so foreign, it's so alien, so you're gonna have to reference it often. Like I said, I wrote the darn ebook, The Number One Rule of Home Recording, and I have to read it almost on a monthly basis to remind myself of what has worked in the past and what works and what philosophy and mindset I need to bring to the production table. Otherwise, I will just go and go and go. If you haven't already downloaded the ebook, check it out. It's called The Number One Rule of Home Recording. Go download it right now. It's free. You'll love it. Thanks for being a subscriber. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, subscribe right here. It's easy. That way you'll get each week's video the moment it goes up. I got a lot of great stuff planned for you. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully these philosophical mindset videos will help you actually get better results. I know they're not tutorial based, but trust me, mindset is critical. Thanks for watching. Go make some great music this week. Talk to you soon.